All right, last episode, we got into priorities and identified golf outing content generation as the biggest and fastest automation win. In this episode, we'll dive into the automation I've built to tackle that task. I'll walk you through the editorial calendar, the control center, if you will, and how AI is going to do the research, the keyword identification, subject matter expert talking points, outlines, and so much more. First three episodes were all about prep and strategy. This time, we're actually building something. So let's get into it.
My name is Keith Mooring, and I am documenting my journey of turning a one-person side hustle into an AI-native business, where AI-powered automations and systems do most of the work. My hope is that the wins and losses along the way serve as a roadmap for other small businesses working to scale and grow in the era of AI.
Welcome to episode 4 of the AI Native Attempt. My name is Keith Mooring. Real quick, before we get started, I was planning out this episode and I realized there's some fundamental how-to stuff we're just kind of glazing over. Uh, Honestly, this whole YouTube thing was never meant to be like a course per se, but some 101 stuff probably wouldn't go amiss here. So in the notes of this video, you're going to find a few resources that may actually help you get up and running on Make and helping you build these automations that we're going to be going through during all these videos that we're creating. So the first one is just like a how integration tools work. Definitely gives you a high level overview of how Make and NAN operate. There is a how to set up your Make account video. And then there's also an OpenAI assistant, how to set up OpenAI assistants. That will help. We're going to use OpenAI quite a bit with some of these automations. Okay. So that's some of the housekeeping stuff. Last episode, which was called priorities, we spent a good amount of time going through what the plan is when it comes to automating playthrough. We walked through the accountability chart, identified the roles for agents and the automations, and then prioritized the automations based on impact and readiness. If you haven't had a chance to review that or watch that one, it's definitely worth the time because we get into kind of the whole thinking and philosophy and kind of where we're going with all of these videos. After all that, first on the list that came back was charity outing resource content. So we're going to try to automate how to write charity outing resource content. Why that topic? Why that angle? Especially if playthrough is a live scoring system, why not focus the content on scoring related content rather than event management? So there's actually two primary reasons for that. First one's pretty personal. Second one was more business related. First one being, I love the people who take the time out of their lives to run these events to help out others, to collect donations for other people. This, honestly, I've been involved in these events. This is no small undertaking. So anything that I can do to help them and simplify their lives, I am happy to do so. The other business related case behind this is Playthrough has built into it a viral sharing component. In other words, one person sets up the event, creates the account, sets up the event, creates the scorecard, and then shares that scorecard link with everyone in their group. These people are often golfers, many of which have their own events or their own little small groups or leagues. So why charity outings? Because sharing one scorecard link at a charity golf outing exposes Playthrough to more than 100 other golfers who also may need my product. Biggest bang for the buck is definitely focusing on the charity golf outings. Okay, so let's get into the actual automation stuff that we built out here. So the first thing is we're talking about a control center. So most AI automations will run in the background. There'll be some sort of scheduled event. They'll go into the system, do what they need to do, and then there'll be some output on the other end. But every so often, you're going to want a user interface, something that your team or you can control and determine what happens, how it happens, when it happens. In the case of content generation, we're going to use an editorial calendar. And this editorial calendar is set up in a very specific way. And I'm going to walk through all the details of this because it's very relevant to how the whole automation is ultimately going to work. So in this editorial calendar, we have 6 columns. The topic here is a tentative headline. It's something we put in there. What is the main point or purpose of this piece of content? And the next column over is a list of the main takeaways or main points I want the post to include. In other words, it's when I want the reader to leave the piece of content knowing. We have a category, and that's just more for organization to make sure we're not writing about one topic too often or compared to another topic. And then we have columns E and F, which I'll get into here in a quick second. The most important column in this whole editorial calendar, especially from controlling and managing the automation side, is this column here, column A, the status column. The way this works is if I come in here and mark this piece of content, this blog post topic here as draft, the automation is going to see that. It's going to grab all this content, all this information, the topic and the talking points, and then it's going to go do what it does. And we're going to walk through that here in a little bit. But it's going to go through, process the information. And on the other end of it, when it's all said and done, I'm going to get these two columns populated. One will include a link to the draft piece of content. And me as the content manager, I could jump in here, click this link, open up that blog post and start reviewing it, editing it, and polishing it up. The other one is the ID of that specific document. And that gets added right here into column F. And the reason we have just the ID there is because eventually down the road, as we layer stuff onto this, we're going to regularly be referencing that Google Doc on the shared drive. And we're going to do that using the ID here. So a lot of that will make sense as we kind of layer on some additional features in here. But that's really how long story short of how the editorial calendar works. Status gets updated, information gets pulled in, and then once it's done, the automation is done doing what it does, I get a link to a draft, and then the ID of that draft is sitting right there in that column. So now let's take a look at what's actually under the hood. So how does this automation actually work? Bigger here. Okay, so this is the automation that I built to generate the content for playthrough, the charity golf outing content for playthrough. And so I'll walk through this as fast as I can. The first version of this episode honestly took 45 minutes to get through. I don't think anyone has that kind of time. So I'm going to go through this relatively quickly. As part of the article for this video, you can download the entire thing. I'm giving it to you along with a template of the editorial calendar. Take it, play with it. All the prompts I use will be included in that. So you can dive into those in more detail whenever you'd like. Okay, so the way this thing works starts out with a trigger, and that trigger is scheduled. In this case, it's scheduled to run every 15 minutes. That's probably overkill. You don't need that kind of level of content production all the time. So typically, in this case, what I will ultimately do is I will schedule this to run every 6 or 12 hours. Once I set the status for the blog content, if I come back the next day and everything's written out and ready to go, then we're good to go. The first thing it's going to do, it's going to go into that editorial calendar based on the ID, and it's only going to look for content that's marked as draft. So any content with a column marked as draft, that's ultimately what's going to get pulled in here. Everything else is going to get ignored. And then the other thing to note here is there's a limit. So I have the limit set to 100. As I get more and more content built out in the editorial calendar, I'm going to probably increase that to like 500, 1,000, 2,000. It really it's determined based on how much content you've got, because it's only going to sort through the first 100 rows to find this content here. So is part of that coming in will be the topic and the talking points for that piece of content. Pro tip here, set up a couple variables. Reason being, so I have 3 of them in here: the company name, company description, audience description. And the reason for that is throughout all of these AI operations, what you're going to do is you're going to reuse a lot of that information. Audience description is used in almost every one of these. Same with company description. And if at any point you want to tweak that or adjust that, you don't want to have to go into each one of these and make that change. By saving them all as variables here at the start, when I want to make an update, I just jump in here, tweak what needs to be tweaked, and I'm done. And everything else changes accordingly. So definitely worth, if you have a repeated type of variable or topic or concept or whatever it is, put it as a variable, and then it'll be used throughout the rest. The next part of this, and I wish we could kind of group these into sections. All right, so this whole block right here this is where I'm generating all the context needed to write the piece of content. We're doing research, we're doing keyword research, we're grabbing tone, past post, and persona, and then we've got an expert insight operation. I'll walk through each of these in turn. So, topic research. We're going to use Perplexity, and we're going to have Perplexity go out and research a little bit about the topic. What you're going to notice with each of these prompts, I always give it a persona and I give it a task, describe what it's being asked to do, and then layer in some of the context that I've already captured. So the blog post topic and the audience description. In this case, I'm giving it a goal. We're going to look for common themes and elements. We're going to look for gaps in existing content that may need to be filled by our content and make sure that the information is relevant. And then I'm defining for it how I want the output sent back to me, including research insights, competitive breakdowns, so on and so forth. I'm going to get that is going to produce for me a blob of text that will essentially include all the research I need to write the content. Probably not all the research, but a good amount that I probably would have had to go out and find myself otherwise. The next thing here is keyword research. Now, you can use a tool like SEMrush or Ahrefs, but the problem is if you want to connect to their API and you want to pull data in from their API, which you could, it's a very powerful tool. You can get a bunch of keyword data, you can get top 5 competitor data, a lot of cool stuff you could unlock with that API, but I don't have $500 a month laying around for this to do it. So what I've decided to do instead is I'm going in to Google Search Console and I'm having it pull query data for the past 3 months. And specifically, I'm also removing branded searches because I don't need that if I'm writing content. All I'm worried about is where I'm ranking already for queries that may be relevant to the topic. Because what I want to do is I want to take relevant queries and feature those as part of the content. Reason being, I've already got a foothold there. I know I'm getting clicks and or impressions for that query. Why not focus it on the content we're writing this time around to help enhance and improve rankings if we can. Now, I'm using this AI tool here, this OpenAI assistant, to find the right term for the content. So again, giving it a persona, you're an SEO expert. Here's what the blog post topic is about. Here's a bunch of query data from the last 6 months, sorted by most clicks per query. And then what I'm asking you to do is go through, based on the blog content, find the most relevant query in this list and based on number of clicks and average position. And then return that as the primary keyword to focus on for the blog content. Now, what I also made sure to do is say, if there isn't a match, let it go, come up with something on your own. And I also help define and put in some parameters around what makes for a good match. There was a couple tries initially that were wildly out of whack, but they used some of the same terms like golf team, but they were returning outfit related keywords rather than some sort of committee that you're using to kind of organize and run the outing. So putting in that context helped make sure that the keywords that are coming back are relevant, but also that I know I already have a foothold in. The next 3 operations are just referencing docs that currently exist on my shared drive. The brand tone and style guide, past blog content. So I have about, I think, 10 examples of those that are some of the best quality content in terms of just flow, voice, narration, the quality of the content itself. So I want those to be referenced when writing new content. And then information about the persona. It doesn't have to be a 30-page report. I think my persona is about 2 pages long, but it definitely includes like seasonality, main pain points, challenges, what success looks like, who they are, that kind of thing. So pulling all that context in. And then this is a really important one. I will spend a minute on this one here. We're creating our own subject matter expert using AI. So I give it the persona of your renowned expert, 20 plus years, hands-on experience doing the very specific thing that we're going to be writing about. You have insider knowledge. And then I'm asking it to give us talking points at an expert level on the topic of the blog content. And these variables here, these are easy enough to pull in because each operation that runs creates its own set of variables. And I cover this in one of the earlier videos, but it's definitely worth mentioning here. So if I wanted to grab the topic for this content, I just come in here and click that and just it drops it right in there. So all I'm doing is each of these little colored spots is a variable generated by one of the other previous operations. So I'm just dropping that into the prompts there for this specific blog post, this specific run. So having it go through that, analyze the topic for this specific audience, and then giving this rules on what I'm looking for on the other side. I want basic stuff, but also a lot of the non-obvious stuff that the pros would know, but the generalists would. I don't want it to call out the fact that as an expert or in my expert opinion, don't like that. It doesn't help out at all. And that also sometimes will also bleed into the draft of the content itself. So have it just showcases expertise by the quality and depth of the insights, how I want it formatted. And then this is another big one that you'll see throughout a lot of the OpenAI prompts that we're using. I ask it to only specifically return the thing I asked for, the only thing I want. I never wanted to include introductory text, a summary, or any sort of conversational phrases that they typically do when you're using a ChatGPT type system. So in this case, just return the outline of talking points. Don't summarize it for me. Don't explain what's going on and what you returned and why you returned it. Doesn't matter. All I want is the outline itself. So we've got that expert insight, and now we've got all the content we need to start drafting the piece of content, or the blog post in this case. And that is largely handled by these three operations right here. And the reason I started breaking things up into specific tasks or steps instead of compiling, okay, outline it and then write the post, is because the more complex you ask the AI tool to do, the less quality the output is. If you give it one very specific task, your job in this case is to generate the outline. What comes back is a lot tighter, lot better quality than what would come back otherwise. So in this case, for the outline, again, I'm giving it a persona. I'm telling it what the task is, and then I'm layering on the context, and I'm defining for it what the context is. So the topic, here's the talking points. The other thing you'll see a lot with the prompts, and this is very valuable when you're building out the prompts within a system like Mate, is it's called structured prompting, where I'm bookending the variables, so the talking points or the research around with these two kind of HTML type formatted text. So research. And the reason for this is it helps differentiate what the content is and what the purpose of that specific portion of the prompt is. So in this case, it knows where the research is because I've told it, it starts here, it ends here. Here's the start of the expert insights. Here's the end of the expert insights. This is absolutely worth doing because it does help the AI tool stay focused and doesn't get lost or confused by what you're sending it within the prompt. So I give the AI tool, in this case, OpenAI Assistant, all the information it needs. Ask it to, like, the one thing I always call out here is no puns. It'll go pun crazy if you let it, especially if you give it a lighthearted, playful type tone. So make sure that whenever you start getting back with the early runs of this, if there's something you don't like, call it out in caps so it stands out. So then that outline gets passed over to the draft. And now we're actually writing the first version of this article. Persona, some context, giving it, essentially, I copied all of this from the outline operation. And the reason being, because these are the same AI tool doesn't mean it's essentially the same chat that you would have with like a chat GPT. Each of these is a standalone conversation. You're not going back and forth with it. So you do have to provide the context each time that you want to call it out within each of these operations. And nothing here is going to carry over to this one here. So I copied and pasted that stuff in and then gave it another set of instructions, how to write my post, the depth and value I'm looking for, what the focus of the audience is. An important one here, especially if you do a resource and education content, ask it not to sell. It will, because it's writing as a company representative, it will try to sell your stuff as part of the content, try to ask for it to be avoiding the promotional content there. formatting rules, how many words, how you want it structured, and then ultimately what you want it to come back with. And once you've done that, you'll have a draft of the piece of content there. If you string a lot of these OpenAI ones together, or yeah, really the same AI tool, if you string them together like that, a lot of them have quotas, depending how fast they move through those first three. I have a little sleep operation here for 30 seconds just to kind of give the AI system a rest. And so we don't cause an error because we burn through too many operations within a minute. Learn that one the hard way also. The other really, really valuable piece to this that took me a while to learn, but once I put it in place, the quality got exponentially better is the SME editor. And what happens here is essentially I'm giving it the role of you're a renowned expert, but you're also an experienced content editor with a key eye for detail, structure, and producing content that resonates. In other words, I'm going to have my expert, who's also a highly qualified editor, review the content with all the context he needs or it needs and have it polish the post. I'm going to have it make sure that it reads right, that if there's any gaps in the information, that the AI tool fills that in. It has the freedom to revise and update, tweak the content itself, but getting a fully written out post and just making updates and adjustments there. Now, the other thing I do, I call out the fact that I don't want conclusion to lead into the last paragraph. They will often do that and summarize it. I hate that when any piece of content includes conclusion. So just ask it to skip that altogether. But on the other end of that, now I've got a polished blog post that's been reviewed by a subject matter expert. Last couple parts here are just to apply the tone and style. So after I've got it written, then I'm going to apply my tone and style to it. If you ask it to apply tone and style while it's writing or while it's editing, it takes away from that core focus of what that operation is designed to do. So by layering that on as a step afterwards, it actually applies it much better. And the quality of the content still is right there because we've already generated that. We've already created that and approved it. Last step here is we're going to have one more AI tool take the markdown language and apply HTML formatting to it. Reason being, especially with Google Drive, when you're uploading a piece of content to Google Drive, if it's not structured in HTML format, it's going to be a blob of text. And to be able to read it, I needed someone to be able to quickly look at it, scan it for subheads, for bullets, all that kind of stuff. So I have this AI tool go through and essentially replace the HTML or the markup, which is that hashtag or colon or whatever it is. Have it change that to be HTML, and then we create the doc within our shared drive. I give it a name, which includes the blog post title. Real quick, it's worth noting that if you ask the AI tools to create something as HTML, what will often come through is triple backtick HTML. So I have this replace, and I put the content of the blog post in there, and then just find this value in there and replace it with nothing. It strips it right out, gets rid of the whole issue. You don't have to worry about it. But then it's all saved onto my shared drive. And then the last step here is it's going to go back into that Google Sheet. It's going to go back into the editorial calendar that we created, find the sheet, find the row, going to update the status to draft ready. And this is key because if it doesn't update the status, every time the thing runs, it's going to create another version of that piece of content, which can chew through a lot of the operations and the make credits that you have. So got to update the status column, in this case, draft ready. And then this is where we take this doc here, a web view link that was created. Again, if you open that up, you can see all these variables that were created or these new data points that were created. You just click that, drop that in there. So column E gets the web view link to that document. And then I've got my document ID that gets dropped right there. And now if we jump back over into the editorial calendar, you can see how this whole thing actually works. So we got our draft ready, created a doc, and there's my doc ID. Now, pretty solid system. It still has me or a human in the loop to make sure that the content gets reviewed. We'll review the content, make sure it's the right quality, that's hitting all the right points. And then we'll also layer on personality and the other additional insights that we have. There is one piece missing, and this is something that we're actually going to cover in the next video. But there's a fatal flaw to this system here. And it simply is I'm not an expert in managing and running a charity golf outing. Who am I to put out content about that topic if I've never done it? I've been involved in and supported an event that we were doing for my uncle years ago, but I've never run the whole thing. I've never managed the whole process. So I'm not an expert on this, but I have come up with a way using automation to get that expert insight. And it has the extra benefit of engaging my current users. So we'll go through that one in the next episode. In the meantime, everything we covered here, the templates, the automation blueprint, I'm going to drop into the show notes and YouTube, as well as we'll send it out in the weekly email that goes out. Check that out, play with it. I'm going to give you everything. So you'll have the whole prompt. You'll have everything will be written for playthrough, but you could tweak and adjust as needed. If you found this valuable, make sure you are subscribing and then you share it with whomever else you think may find value in these videos. But the next few videos are going to be very cool because we're going to look for expert insight, pull that into this process. And we're going to go through how do we upload it? How do we create the assets on top of it? So it'll be a couple cool videos. So I hope you subscribe. Hope you found this helpful.